The food in the alley every night. The narrow alley behind the old bakery came alive with soft rustles and low growls. It was the sound of stray dogs waiting for the only person who cared enough to feed them. That person was Daniel, a man who lived a quiet life in the city. He worked during the day, but at night he carried small bags of food for the hungry animals that had no one else. The dogs knew his steps when they heard his shoes tapping against the cracked pavement. They wagged their tails and barked in joy. Daniel smiled as he placed bowls of food on the ground. One after another, it was a simple act, but for him, it felt right. He never liked seeing hunger not in people, not in animals, not in anyone, that night. The moon was hidden by clouds, and the alley felt darker than usual. Daniel set down the food, watching the dogs rush forward, their bones sticking out from thin bodies. As they ate, he turned around to head home, but something made him stop. A sound, faint but sharp, reached his ears. It was not the sound of a dog, nor the cry of a cat. It was something else. He froze. Listening, from the far end of the alley came a whisper. Low and trembling, he narrowed his eyes, trying to see through the shadows. And that was when he saw them, two small figures crouched against the wall. They weren't dogs, and they weren't human children either. Their skin glowed faintly under the dim streetlight, a pale silver hue that didn't belong to this world. Their eyes were wide, shining with an otherworldly light. And they looked straight at him. Daniel felt his chest tighten. For a second, he thought he was dreaming. But the fear on their faces was too real. They were thin, weaker than the dogs, their bodies trembling as if they hadn't eaten for days. One of them held the other's hand tightly, shielding her like an older sister. The younger one whimpered softly, a sound that broke through the night like glass. Daniel stepped closer, careful not to frighten them. "Hey, it's okay," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if they understood. The older girl flinched, pulling her sister closer. Her glowing eyes darted between Daniel and the dogs, as if she expected him to attack, but hunger was stronger than fear. The younger one sniffed the air, looking at the food bowls where the dogs ate hungrily. Daniel slowly bent down, picking a piece of bread from his bag. He placed it on the ground and stepped back. The older girl hesitated, her body tense. But the younger one crawled forward. Her small hands shook as she grabbed the bread. Stuffing it into her mouth, tears rolled down her cheeks as she ate. The older girl finally joined her, grabbing food with desperate trembling hands. Daniel watched, his heart heavy. These were not stray animals. These were children, alien, children alone and starving on Earth. He didn't know how they got here or why, but he knew one thing. They needed help. The dogs growled softly, uneasy with the strange newcomers, but Daniel raised his hand. Calming them down, his mind raced, filled with questions he couldn't answer. Were they hiding from someone? Had they escaped something? Or were they simply lost? The younger girl finished her food quickly, then looked up at him with glowing eyes, her lips parted as if to speak. But no words came out, only a soft, broken sound. The older girl whispered something in a language Daniel didn't know. It sounded sharp, almost musical. But filled with fear, she pulled her sister back, pressing against the wall as though shadows themselves were chasing them. Daniel glanced at the sky, uneasy. He had no idea that his simple act of kindness feeding stray dogs had just opened the door to something far greater, something that would change not only his life, but maybe the future of Earth itself. The night air felt colder. The city was quiet. But Daniel could not shake the feeling that somewhere, someone or something was hunting these girls. And now, by finding them, he had become part of their secret. Asterisk's strange eyes in the dark. Daniel could not forget the way those eyes glowed in the dark. They were not like human eyes, not even close. They carried light inside them, like tiny lanterns trapped in frightened bodies. The alley was quiet, except for the sound of the dogs still eating. But Daniel felt as if the shadows themselves were watching. He crouched a little, lowering his voice. "You don't need to be scared," he said softly. The older girl tightened her grip on the younger one's arm, pulling her back against the wall. Her gaze was sharp, not like a child's at all. It was protective, almost fierce. The younger girl, however, leaned forward slightly, her glowing eyes fixed on the food bag Daniel still carried. Daniel reached slowly into the bag. Pulling out a small piece of cooked meat, he placed it gently on the ground. Sliding it closer to them, the younger one whimpered. Torn between hunger and fear, the older whispered something in that strange language again, shaking her head, but her stomach betrayed her with a loud growl. Daniel could hear it clearly in the silence, and he knew hunger would win. The younger girl crawled forward, her silver skin catching the faint light. Her hands shook as she picked up the meat and bit into it quickly. Tears fell from her bright eyes as she chewed, as if eating was both a relief and a painful memory. Daniel's chest tightened. He had seen hungry people before, but never like this. Never creatures that looked so human, yet so different. The older girl finally moved too, her pride breaking under the weight of her hunger. She reached out, grabbed the piece of bread Daniel placed next, and devoured it with trembling hands. When she finished, she wiped her mouth quickly and stared at him, her glowing eyes narrowing. It was not trust, not yet. But it was no longer pure fear either. Daniel sat down slowly on the cold ground. Showing he meant no harm, the dogs circled behind him. Uneasy, but they stayed back, sensing his calm. The younger alien whispered something, her voice soft and broken. Daniel could not understand. But the sound was enough. That was not a growl, not a threat, but a plea. The older shook her head quickly, speaking back in the same sharp tongue. As though warning her not to speak to him, Daniel raised his hands. "It's okay," he said, pointing to himself. Then, tapping his chest, "Daniel," he repeated it again, clear and slow. "Daniel." The girls tilted their heads, confused. But then the younger one copied his movement, pressing her small hand against her chest. She said something soft, a name perhaps, but Daniel could not catch it. Still, the attempt was enough to make him smile. For a moment, silence fell again. But then Daniel noticed movement further down the alley. A flicker of red light swept across the walls like a scanner. His heart froze. The girls saw it too. Their bodies tensed instantly, fear flashing in their eyes brighter than before. The older one hissed something urgent to her sister, pulling her back deeper into the shadows. Daniel stood, glancing toward the strange red light. It vanished as quickly as it came, leaving only darkness, but he knew, deep inside, that it was not natural. Something was out there, searching. And the way the girls reacted told him they were the targets. The younger one whimpered, hiding her face against her sister's shoulder. The older girl glared at Daniel, her glowing eyes sharp and full of warning, as if telling him to stay away, but Daniel couldn't. He had already stepped into their world the moment he placed food before them. He couldn't turn his back now, not when fear like this lived in the eyes of starving children. The dogs barked suddenly, their heads turning toward the street. Daniel's pulse quickened. He knew that whatever had passed the alley with red light would be back. And if they found these girls, the night would end in something far worse than hunger. Daniel took a slow step toward them, his voice firm but calm. "You can't stay here," he whispered. Pointing toward his small apartment in the distance, the older girl shook her head fiercely. But her sister looked at him with wide, desperate eyes for a brief second. Daniel saw the decision breaking inside them. They were too afraid to trust, yet too weak to refuse. The strange eyes in the dark followed his every move. And Daniel knew that from this night on, his life would never be the same. Asterisk. The hidden chase Daniel led the way out of the alley. His steps careful and quiet. The dogs stayed behind, growling low as if they sensed something was wrong. The two alien girls followed him slowly, their bare feet hardly making a sound. The younger one clung to her sister's arm, still trembling, while the older kept looking over her shoulder as though shadows themselves were chasing them. The streets were nearly empty. Lit only by weak streetlights, Daniel kept glancing around, his heart beating faster with every corner they turned. That red light in the alley had not been a trick of his imagination. Someone or something was searching, and the girls knew it too when they passed an abandoned shop window. Daniel caught a reflection, a faint glow in the distance. Moving slowly down the road, it wasn't headlights. It wasn't a flashlight, it was different. The older girl noticed it too and froze, whispering something sharp in her alien tongue. The younger whimpered, pulling her sister back. But Daniel motioned quickly for them to follow him. He led them into a narrow side street, almost hidden between two tall buildings. The air smelled of rust and old trash, but it gave them cover. Daniel pressed his back against the wall. Breathing carefully, the girls copied him, crouching low, their glowing eyes peeking through the dark. The strange light moved past the main street. Sweeping like a search beam, Daniel could feel the tension in the girls, their small hands clenching each other so tightly their knuckles turned pale silver. The younger one whispered, her voice shaky, "Hun." Turs, Daniel's blood went cold. He didn't understand their language, but that word was clear enough. A sudden metallic sound echoed through the street like a drone worry. Daniel peeked from behind the wall and saw it a dark machine hovering just above the ground. "It's red." I scanned the road, clicking softly. The girls stiffened, pressing themselves against him as if he could shield them. Daniel's mind raced. He had no weapons, no plan, just instinct. He looked around quickly and spotted an old metal trash can. Reaching for it, he tipped it over, sending bottles clattering loudly down the opposite street. The machine turned at once, the red eye sweeping toward the noise. It hummed and floated away in that direction. Daniel grabbed the girl's hands, whispering urgently, "Move." Now they hurried through the narrow street, their footsteps echoing softly against the walls. The older girl pulled her sister along with surprising strength. Her glowing eyes darted everywhere, searching for danger. Daniel led them toward his small apartment at the edge of the block. It wasn't much a single room, peeling paint, broken heater, but it was shelter. As they neared the door, the younger girl stumbled, almost falling. Daniel caught her just in time, lifting her into his arms. She was so light it hurt him to think how little she must have eaten. Her sister hissed something in warning, but Daniel shook his head. "She's safe," he whispered, for a moment. The older one's eyes softened, just for a heartbeat, before hardening again inside the apartment. Daniel locked the door quickly, shutting out the night. The girls stood in the corner. Still wary, still trembling, Daniel pulled out more food, placing it gently on the table. The younger girl rushed forward while the older hesitated, scanning the small room as if searching for traps. Finally, hunger won again, and she joined her sister. Daniel sat on the chair, watching them eat. The sound of their chewing was broken by distant hums outside. The hunters were still out there, searching. And now Daniel realized something he hadn't before. By helping them, by bringing them here, he had made himself part of the chase. The girls were not just refugees, not just starving children. They were being hunted, and whoever wanted them would not stop. Daniel leaned back, staring at the cracked ceiling. The night felt heavy, but one thought echoed louder than the rest. The chase had only begun. Asterisk secrets revealed the small room was silent except for the sound of chewing. Daniel sat at the edge of his bed, watching the two alien girls eat like they had never seen food before. Their glowing eyes flicked toward him every few seconds. Cautious, uncertain, but no longer filled with only fear. He could see now in the light-thin arms, bruises along their skin, and strange marks like burned symbols carved into their wrists. Whatever they had escaped from had not been kind. The younger girl finished first, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. Her silver skin shimmered faintly, catching the dull light bulb above. She looked at him as if trying to speak, her lips opening, but no words coming. Instead, she made a sound, a broken syllable that almost sounded like his name. Da. Neil, his breath caught. She had listened when he introduced himself in the alley. The older sisters scolded her softly in their alien tongue, pulling her close as if warning her not to trust. But Daniel leaned forward slowly, his hands open, his voice calm. "I won't hurt you," the older girl studied him, her glowing eyes sharp and full of suspicion. Then, with trembling hands, she pointed to the marks on her wrist. She tapped the symbol and hissed a single word. Lab Daniel's stomach sank. He understood enough. They had been locked away, experimented on. Treated not as children, but as things. The older girl whispered more words. Some broken English mixed with her alien speech. Hunters. Take. Always take. Never stop, she said, her voice low and bitter. The younger one buried her face in her sister's shoulder. Whimpering softly, Daniel felt anger burning in his chest. He had thought maybe they were just lost travelers, maybe refugees from a ship, but this was worse, far worse. Someone had captured them, studied them, and now those same people were chasing them through the streets of Earth. The red light, the hovering machine, it all made sense now. Daniel rubbed his face, trying to think, why here? He whispered more to himself than to them. The older girl looked at him, her voice shaking. Earth. Not safe. No safe place. Her words were broken, but clear enough. They had escaped, but nowhere was safe, not even this planet. The younger girl tugged at her sister's arm, and then at Daniel's sleeve. She whispered something soft, a word that sounded almost like family. Daniel froze, staring at her glowing eyes for the first time since he found them. They weren't filled only with fear. They carried a desperate hope. A silent question: would he protect them? Daniel stood and paced the room, his heart pounding. He knew what he should do: call someone. Alert the authorities. Let them handle it. But then he remembered the marks burned into their skin, the way their bodies trembled, the way their eyes begged. If the authorities were already working with the hunters, then calling them would be the same as handing the girls back. And Daniel could not do that. The older girl finally spoke again. Her voice almost a whisper. "Hide. Please," she said, each word slow, forced. But powerful Daniel turned to her, meeting her glowing gaze in that moment. A silent agreement passed between them. He would hide them, protect them, no matter the cost. A sudden hum outside shattered the fragile peace. The younger girl gasped and clung tighter to her sister. Through the cracked window, Daniel saw a red beam sliding across the street. Sweeping left to right, the hunters were close again. His heart raced as he pulled the curtains shut. There was no time left for questions. No time left for doubt. He had promised with his eyes. And now he had to keep that promise. The secrets were no longer just theirs. They were his burden too, and the night was far from over. Asterisk. The hunters arrived. The apartment walls felt thinner than paper that night. Every sound outside made Daniel's heart jump. The girls sat close together on the floor, their glowing eyes wide, listening for danger. The younger one had stopped eating, her small hands shaking as she clung to her sister. The older girl kept whispering words Daniel didn't understand. But he could tell they were warnings, prayers, or both. Then it came. A low hum filled the street outside. Not from a car, not from anything human. Daniel froze by the window. Peeking through the curtain just enough to see, the red beam returned, sweeping slowly across the neighborhood like a predator sniffing for prey. But this time it wasn't alone. Figures moved with it, tall and shadowed, their bodies wrapped in dark suits that gleamed faintly under the beam. They walked with purpose, scanning each house. Every alley, every door. The hunters, the girls, stiffened at the same moment, as if they felt the presence before seeing it. The older one hissed through her teeth. Pulling her sister back into the corner, the younger whimpered, hiding her glowing eyes behind her hands. Daniel's breath quickened. They had found the street, and soon they would find his door. His mind raced. He had no weapons, no plan. Nothing but old furniture and a heart pounding too loud. But he couldn't just sit and wait. He looked around the apartment, searching for anything that could help. His eyes landed on the box of firecrackers he had bought last summer, dusty and forgotten in the drawer beside them. A cracked mirror he had never thrown away. Daniel grabbed both, his brain working faster than fear. He whispered to the girls, "Stay quiet. Don't move." They didn't understand the words, but his tone was enough. The older girl nodded once, her eyes sharp and filled with fear, but also with trust she hadn't shown before. A sudden knock rattled the door. Loud and sharp, Daniel's stomach twisted. The hunters were here. He moved quickly, lighting the firecrackers and tossing them through the bathroom window into the alley behind. The explosions cracked through the night, sharp and echoing. Instantly, the hunters outside shifted, turning their red beams toward the sound. Daniel pressed the mirror against the front window at an angle, reflecting the red beam back across the street. For a moment, it confused their scanners. Bouncing the light away, the girls clung to each other. Silent, Daniel crouched low, sweat dripping down his forehead. Every second felt stretched, endless. The hunter's footsteps moved away from his door, following the explosions. Their strange voices clicking like static, but one stayed behind. Daniel felt the shadow pause right outside, the red glow sliding across the cracks of the door. He held his breath, praying it would move on. The silence was unbearable. Then suddenly, the knob turned. The door creaked, opening just an inch. Daniel's pulse roared in his ears. He grabbed the nearest thing he had, a metal pipe from under the sink, and raised it. The girl's glowing eyes widened in terror, but before the figure stepped inside, another explosion cracked down the street. Louder this time, the hunter outside hissed and turned, slamming the door shut again. As it hurried after the sound, Daniel collapsed to his knees, his grip trembling around the pipe. The girls rushed to his side, their small hands touching his arm, their glowing eyes filled with both fear and relief. The hunters were gone for now, but Daniel knew this was only the beginning. They had found the street. They had almost found his door. Next time, tricks like firecrackers and broken mirrors would not be enough. He had bought them one night of safety, nothing more. Daniel looked at the girls, his voice low but steady. "We have to move," he whispered. The older one nodded, already knowing the truth. The chase would not stop, and if they stayed here, death would find them. The hunters had arrived, and the game had changed. Asterisk the bond of trust. The night stretched long after the hunters left. Daniel didn't sleep, neither did the girls. They huddled together in the corner of his small apartment, their glowing eyes open wide, scanning every shadow as if danger could slip through the cracks in the walls. Daniel sat near the door, gripping the metal pipe tightly, his ears tuned to the silence outside. He had never felt so responsible in his life, and never so afraid. When dawn finally came, a pale light slipped through the curtains. The city outside woke slowly, cars honking, neighbors shouting, footsteps echoing in the street. To anyone else, it was a normal morning. But inside Daniel's apartment, the air was heavy. The girls looked exhausted. Their silver skin pale, but they were alive. And for Daniel, that was enough. He placed more food on the table. Bread and boiled eggs, whatever he had. The younger girl ran to it quickly, grabbing it with both hands, her cheeks puffing as she stuffed her mouth. The older one moved slower, but this time, she didn't look at him with only suspicion. Her gaze was softer, still guarded, but no longer filled with the sharp edge of fear. Daniel smiled gently. "Eat. It's yours," he said, pointing to the food. The older girl studied him for a moment, then whispered in broken English, "Why?" "Help." The question cut deep. Daniel hesitated, then shrugged. "Because no one should starve. Not here, not anywhere." She tilted her head, as if trying to understand not just his words, but the weight behind them. The younger one finished eating and came close, tugging at Daniel's sleeve. She pointed to herself, tapping her chest, then whispered a name, soft, musical, but trembling. "Lyra." Daniel repeated it carefully. "Lyra." Her glowing eyes lit up, and she nodded quickly, smiling for the first time. Then she tapped her sister's arm, and the older girl sighed before saying her own name. "Kayla?" Daniel nodded. "Lyra and Kayla," he said, pointing to them, then tapping his chest. Daniel, for a moment, something changed in the room. The fear didn't vanish, but trust began to grow, fragile like a candle flame, but strong enough to push the shadows back. Kayla leaned closer, her voice low, her words broken but understandable. "Hunters want us. Not stop. Never stop." She touched the burned marks on her wrist, her glowing eyes dark with memory. Daniel clenched his jaw, his anger building. He didn't know how powerful these hunters were, or what they wanted with the girls. But he knew one thing: he couldn't hand them over. He reached out slowly, placing his hand gently on Kayla's wrist. Over the scarred mark, her body tensed, ready to pull away. But then she stopped. Her eyes searched his. And after a long moment, she let her hand stay. It was not much, but it was trust. The day passed slowly. Daniel keeping the curtains closed every time a car passed or a neighbor knocked on another door. The girls froze, but little by little they began to relax near him. Lyra even laughed once, a small, broken laugh. When Daniel pretended to trip over his chair, Kayla almost smiled too, though she tried to hide it that evening. Daniel looked at them and said quietly, "You're safe here, I promise." Kayla frowned, shaking her head. "Not safe. Nowhere safe," she whispered. But her voice held less resistance, less disbelief. It was as if a part of her wanted to believe him. As the sky outside turned dark again, Daniel placed blankets on the floor. Making a bed for them, Lyra curled up quickly, her small hand clutching her sister's. Kayla sat awake longer, staring at Daniel, her glowing eyes unblinking. Finally, she whispered one word, quiet but clear. "Protector." Daniel's chest tightened. He had never been called that before, but now, sitting in a small, broken apartment with two alien girls depending on him, he knew the bond between them was no accident. Trust had been built in fear, in hunger, in danger, and now it was stronger than anything the hunters could understand. Asterisk. A dangerous discovery the next morning brought no peace. Daniel had barely slept. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant hum outside made his pulse race. The girls were still asleep, curled together under the blankets. Their glowing eyes finally closed, for the first time. They looked less like strange creatures from another world and more like children who just wanted safety. Daniel sat at the small table, staring at the marks on Kayla's wrist. Those burned symbols haunted him. They weren't random, he was sure of it. He had seen symbols before military codes, factory stamps, even branding marks on animals. But these were different, sharper, deliberate. Someone had carved meaning into their skin. When Kayla woke, she noticed him staring. Her glowing eyes narrowed, and she pulled her arm close to her chest. But Daniel raised his hands quickly. "I'm not angry at you," he whispered. I want to understand." Kayla hesitated, then slowly stretched her arm out again. Showing the scar, her voice was quiet, broken but clear enough. "Experiment." Daniel's chest tightened. It was worse than he thought. They weren't just being chased. They had been tested, used, like objects. Lyra stirred awake too, rubbing her eyes, and whispered something in her own language. Kayla replied softly, but the word lab slipped through. And Daniel understood. He stood, pacing the room. So Earth wasn't just hiding strays anymore. It was hiding experiments. Someone, somewhere, was capturing alien children and branding them like cattle. But why? Daniel's mind raced. The girls were young, weak, starving. What could possibly make them so valuable that hunters would cross the city to chase them? Kayla answered the question herself. Though she didn't know it, she pointed at Lyra's chest, then touched Daniel's arm. Her glowing eyes were serious, inside. "Code," she whispered, struggling with the words, "her blood." "Different." Daniel froze, staring at the younger girl. She tilted her head, confused by his reaction. "Still chewing on the last piece of bread from breakfast." "Code." Daniel repeated. Kayla nodded, her face hard. Key. The words hit him like a stone. The younger one wasn't just a refugee, she carried something inside her. Something in her blood that was powerful enough to be called a key. Daniel didn't know what it opened, but he knew it was the reason the hunters would never stop. Lyra leaned against her sister, blinking up at Daniel with wide, innocent eyes. She had no idea what she carried, or maybe she did, but didn't understand it fully. Daniel's mind spun with questions. But before he could ask more, a distant thud shook the walls. The sound wasn't from inside the building, but close, too close. Kayla stiffened instantly, pulling Lyra behind her. Her glowing eyes flashed as she hissed a single word. Hunters. Daniel rushed to the window. Peeking through the curtain, down the street, he saw them again. Dark figures, moving like shadows. Their scanners sweeping door to door, but this time, they weren't searching quietly this time. They were forcing their way inside homes. Daniel's heart pounded. It was no longer just about hiding. It was about survival if they reached his door. There would be no tricks to save them this time. He turned to Kayla, his voice low but firm. "We can't stay here. They'll find us." Kayla's jaw tightened. Her glowing eyes locked on him. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence heavy with unspoken fears. Then Lyra stepped forward, her small hand reaching for his. She whispered something soft, almost like a plea. Daniel didn't understand the word, but he understood the look. She trusted him completely, and that trust gave him strength. Daniel grabbed his coat. Stuffing food into a bag, he turned to the girls. "We're leaving." Kayla shook her head, fear flickering in her eyes, but then she glanced at her sister, saw her holding Daniel's hand, and finally nodded. The discovery weighed heavy in his mind. Lyra was not just a child, she was a key, and now it was his responsibility to keep that key safe from whatever darkness hunted her. The hunters were closer than ever, and the truth was far more dangerous than he imagined. The first fight. The hallway outside Daniel's apartment echoed with heavy steps, not the casual thump of neighbors, but sharp, deliberate strides. Kayla pulled Lyra close, her glowing eyes flashing with panic. Daniel tightened his grip on the metal pipe, his breath quick and shallow. He had no weapons that could match whatever the hunters carried. But he had no choice. The first knock came like a hammer against the door. The sound rattled the frame, dust falling from the ceiling. Daniel froze, his muscles stiff. Then another blow came, harder. As if the hunters weren't knocking, but testing how strong the barrier was. Kayla hissed in her alien tongue, pulling Lyra behind the old couch. Daniel shook his head, whispering, "No time. We have to fight." The door cracked open, light spilling into the room. A dark figure stepped inside, tall, armored. Its helmet glowing faint red at the eyes. It held a strange weapon in one hand. Something that hummed with low energy. The hunter scanned the room, its voice clicking like static. Daniel didn't wait. He swung the pipe with all his strength. The metal smashed against the hunter's arm, the weapon clattering to the floor with a sharp hiss. The creature hissed back, striking with inhuman speed. Its fist slammed into Daniel's chest, knocking him against the wall, pain spreading through his ribs. He gasped, but forced himself up, grabbing the fallen weapon. The alien tech buzzed in his hands, its surface smooth and alive. He aimed without knowing how it worked and pulled the trigger. A flash of blue light shot out, striking the hunter square in the chest. The creature staggered, its armor sparking. But it didn't fall. It roared, a sound more machine than flesh, and lunged forward. Daniel stumbled back, firing again. But the weapon sputtered and died. The hunter raised its clawed hand, ready to strike. That was when Kayla moved. She stood tall, her glowing eyes blazing brighter than ever. She raised both her hands, and for a moment, Daniel thought she was only trying to block the blow. But then light burst from her palms, white and sharp. Like lightning breaking through clouds, the hunter screamed, its body shuddering as the energy crackled across its armor. It fell back, smoke rising from the gaps in its suit. Daniel stared in shock. Kayla collapsed to her knees, trembling, her chest heaving as if the effort had drained everything from her. Lyra ran to her, wrapping her small arms around her sister, whispering frantically. Daniel dropped the dead weapon and rushed to them. You did that," he whispered. Still stunned, Kayla looked up, her glowing eyes dimmer now. But filled with warning, she shook her head, gasping out broken words. "Not safe." More come, as if her words called them. More shadows filled the hallway, their red eyes glowing through the broken door. Daniel cursed under his breath, pulling the girls toward the back room. The hunters shouted in their strange, static voices, their steps heavy as they stormed inside. Daniel grabbed a chair and shoved it against the door, buying only seconds. Kayla struggled to stand, leaning on him, her body weak but her eyes still fierce. Lyra clung to both of them, tears rolling down her silver cheeks. The sound of the hunters breaking through grew louder, wood splintering, metal bending. Daniel's heart thundered. He had survived the first fight, but the next one would decide everything. He looked at the girls, then at the small window leading to the fire escape. There was no choice left. They had to run. The hunters were inside the building now, and the fight for survival had only just begun. Asterisk. A choice of worlds. The night air hit Daniel's face as he pulled the girls through the fire escape. Cold wind rushed past the broken buildings. Carrying the distant hum of machines, Kayla staggered, still weak from the burst of power she had unleashed. Lyra clung to Daniel's arm, her glowing eyes wide with fear but also with trust. Behind them, the hunters smashed through the apartment, their static voices echoing like broken radios. Daniel guided the girls down the narrow metal steps, every creak sounding like thunder in the silence. The street below was empty, shadows stretching long under the streetlights. But he knew it wouldn't stay empty for long. The hunters were closing in, their scanners sweeping block by block. And now, Daniel understood this wasn't just about protecting two children anymore. Kayla leaned against the railing, whispering through heavy breaths, "You no safe now, Daniel." Her words were broken. But the meaning was sharp. Helping them meant he was hunted too. He could walk away, leave them, maybe survive. But when he looked at Lyra's small, trembling hands and Kella's dim but burning eyes, he knew he couldn't. They moved quickly through the alleys, keeping low. Daniel carried Lyra when her legs grew too weak, every time he glanced at Kayla. He saw the weight she carried, not just fear, but knowledge. She knew something about Lyra's blood, something about the key she had spoken of. And Daniel began to realize this secret wasn't only about the girls. It was about the future of Earth. They found shelter in an abandoned warehouse, its windows broken, its roof leaking rainwater. Daniel set the girls down and listened to the distant hums of hunters outside. Kayla sat against the wall, her breathing slow, her hands trembling as if her body was still paying the price for the energy she had used. Lyra curled against her sister, then looked up at Daniel, whispering softly. "Protect her," the word cut deep into him, filling him with both pride and dread. Daniel crouched down, his voice low. "Kayla, tell me the truth. What is it about Lyra? Why are they chasing her?" Kayla hesitated, her glowing eyes flickering in the dark. Then she whispered in broken words, "Her blood. Cure. Weapon?" "Both." Daniel froze. "Cure." He repeated. Kayla nodded weakly. "Alien sickness. Her blood heal, but also destroy." Daniel felt the weight of her words like stones pressing down on his chest. If Lyra's blood could cure diseases, then it could save millions, but if twisted into a weapon, it could end entire worlds. And that was why the hunters wanted her. Not just because she was valuable, but because she was dangerous. Daniel leaned back, running a hand through his hair. He was just one man, an ordinary man who fed stray dogs at night. But now, the choice in front of him wasn't small. Protecting these girls meant protecting something that could change the balance of power across galaxies. He could turn them in, maybe save himself, maybe even get a reward. Or he could keep fighting, knowing he was only human against forces far beyond him. Lyra reached out suddenly, placing her hand on his. Her glowing eyes were wide and soft, trusting. She didn't understand the weight of the choice, or maybe she did in her own way. But she didn't need to say anything. Her touch was enough. Daniel took a deep breath, his voice firm. "Then, I'll protect you. No matter what." Kella's eyes widened, searching his face for lies, but she found none. Her lips trembled. And for the first time, she whispered without hesitation. "Family." Outside, the hunter's hum grew louder, the red glow sweeping closer. The choice had been made, and Daniel knew there was no turning back. It was not only a fight for two alien girls anymore. It was a fight for worlds. Asterisk humanity's protector. The warehouse walls shook as the hunters closed in. Their red beams sliced through the cracks in the broken windows. Scanning the shadows, Kayla pushed Lyra behind her. Though her body still trembled from weakness, Daniel stood at the center of the room, gripping the metal pipe in one hand, the alien weapon in the other. His heart pounded, but his mind was clear now. There was no escape left, only one choice fight. The door crashed open, splinters flying. 3 hunters stepped inside, tall and armored, their weapons glowing with deadly light. Their voices buzzed like static, their helmets turning as one toward the girls. Daniel stepped forward, raising the weapon. "You'll have to go through me first," he growled. The hunters hissed, their red eyes burning brighter. The first one lunged, swinging its blade-like arm. Daniel ducked, rolling across the floor, and fired the alien gun. Blue energy burst out, striking the hunter's chest, sparks flying. It staggered but didn't fall, roaring as it advanced again. Daniel swung the metal pipe into its leg. Knocking it off balance, the creature crashed to the ground, thrashing as Daniel hit it again and again until the armor cracked. The second hunter fired its weapon, a searing bolt of red light blasting through the air. Daniel shoved Kayla and Lyra aside, the beam missing them by inches and exploding against the wall. Dust rained down, the roof groaning. Kayla raised her hands again. Summoning light from deep inside, her palms blazed white. A surge of power bursting forward, the second hunter screamed as the energy struck, its armor glowing hot before it collapsed in smoke. But the blast drained Kayla, her knees buckling. Daniel caught her just before she fell. "You're not alone," he whispered, his eyes burning with determination. He set her down carefully and turned back just in time to see the third hunter charging toward Lyra. The little girl froze, tears shining in her glowing eyes. "No." Daniel roared. He threw himself forward, tackling the hunter with all his strength. The two crashed into a pile of metal crates, the impact shaking the floor. The alien's claws slashed across Daniel's arm, pain burning, but he didn't stop. He grabbed a broken shard of metal and jammed it into the gaps of the armor. The hunter shrieked, its body convulsing, until it finally collapsed. Motionless, Daniel staggered back, his chest heaving, blood dripping from his arm. The warehouse was silent again, except for the sound of Lyra's sobs and Kella's heavy breathing. Daniel dropped the broken weapon, his hands shaking, but he was still standing. He had done it. A human, just one man, had fought and survived against the hunters. Lyra ran to him, wrapping her small arms around his waist. Crying into his shirt, Kayla slowly stood, her glowing eyes filled with something new, not fear, not suspicion, but respect. She looked at Daniel as though seeing him not just as a protector, but as something greater, protector. "Family human," she whispered, her voice trembling but sure. Daniel placed a hand on each of their shoulders, his voice low but firm. "No one will take you," he said. "Not while I breathe." The girls clung to him, their bonds sealed in the ashes of battle. Outside, the city lights flickered, the hum of distant hunters still moving in the night. This was only one fight, Daniel knew, not the end. But something had changed. He was no longer just a man who fed stray dogs. He was a protector, a shield between innocence and the darkness hunting them. And as Kayla and Lyra held on to him, glowing eyes filled with fragile hope, Daniel realized something even greater. He hadn't just saved two alien girls. He had taken the first step in saving humanity itself.